It started with a question that no one was really asking, at least not aloud. What if everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you was only half the truth? Imagine returning home after years away, expecting familiarity, expecting comfort, only to find that the very foundation of your understanding has shifted beneath you. That's where Prince Harry found himself, and what he discovered didn't just disturb him. It redefined everything he thought he knew about his family, about loyalty, and about trust. But before we continue, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for updates. You see, secrets in royal circles aren't unusual. They've been part of the narrative for centuries. Controlled statements, carefully curated images, and the occasional discreet leak. But this was different. This wasn't a matter of political strategy, of public perception, or even of tradition. This was something far more intimate, something personal, something that went straight to the heart of identity itself. And it had been hidden for longer than anyone could have imagined. And now, the revelation had finally arrived, not through a hushed conversation in some palace corridor, but via a voice that has always carried weight, that has always demanded attention: Tom Bower. Known for his painstakingly sourced biographies and his unflinching willingness to expose truths, Bower had come forward with information that would ripple across every narrative anyone had constructed around Meghan Markle. And if you think you know Meghan Markle, think again, because what Bower revealed didn't just challenge the public story, it undermined private trust. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. The full implications are staggering, and to understand why, you have to first understand the moment, the context, the atmosphere surrounding Harry's return. He didn't come back quietly. He didn't return with fanfare or statements. He returned with the weight of revelation, a revelation that had been hidden, manipulated, and carefully buried, until finally, the truth could no longer be contained. And for the first time, he was facing it, not as a rumor, not as speculation, but as documented fact. There's a certain tension that comes with discovery, especially one so deeply personal. You can't prepare for it. You can't predict it. You can only experience it. And that tension, that unease, that slow burn realization is exactly what makes this story unlike anything we've seen before. Because this isn't about palace intrigue or gossip. This isn't about tabloid exaggeration. This is about a man confronting a hidden reality regarding someone he loved, trusted, and built his life around. It's about the fracture lines appearing in real time. So what exactly happened? What was it that Bower uncovered? In essence, he revealed that Meghan Markle had gone to extraordinary lengths to obscure the truth of one child's paternity. Documents, private medical records, carefully curated statements, all manipulated, all arranged to create a narrative that protected her image, her plans, and intentionally or not, left Prince Harry in the dark. And think about that for a second. The trust, the intimacy, the basic assumption that someone you love and partner with is being truthful about something so fundamental, compromised. For years, unknowingly, Harry was operating under a false premise, believing in a truth that wasn't actually his to hold. You might ask, why now? Why did this come out when it did? And the answer is as revealing as the truth itself. Bower, meticulous and patient, had pieced together the story over years, waiting for the right moment, corroborating sources, verifying documents. And when he finally spoke, the impact wasn't just immediate, it was seismic. Because timing matters. Secrets, no matter how carefully buried, have a half-life, and the longer they remain hidden, the more explosive their revelation becomes. And it's not just the secrecy that shocks, it's the calculated precision of the concealment. Consider this. The very tools meant to protect privacy, the medical system, professional discretion, and the natural expectation of trust, were leveraged, consciously or unconsciously, to craft a narrative, a story, that could survive scrutiny for years. That's not accident. That's design. And it's here, in the mechanics of concealment, where the tension tightens, where the audience begins to feel the unease. We should pause here and ask the obvious question. How does someone manage to hide a truth like this from someone so close for so long? How do you manipulate not just perception, but records, access, and knowledge, in a way that leaves your partner unaware until the very moment of discovery? And more importantly, What does it do to a relationship when one person finally learns the truth, that what they believed was reliable, sacred even, was constructed? Harry's return, then, was not simply a return to a geographic location. It was a return to confrontation, with reality, with identity, and with the implications of knowledge delayed. He returned to a place familiar in every outward sense, yet altered at the core by the revelation of what had been hidden. And in that return lies the emotional center of the story, the clash between expectation and reality, trust and betrayal, perception and truth. But let's not confuse intensity with drama for drama's sake. The story unfolds with restraint, with measured observations, because the power lies in its subtlety. A quiet record here, a hesitant statement there, a document overlooked for years. The accumulation of small decisions and omissions builds into something irreversibly significant. And that's the kind of tension that keeps us leaning forward, isn't it? The kind of tension that makes us wonder not just what happened, but how it feels for the person living it. We also have to consider the human aspect, the psychological weight. Imagine carrying a belief your whole life, only to discover it rests on carefully curated falsehoods. Imagine the cognitive dissonance, the self-doubt, the questioning of everything you thought you understood. And then imagine having to navigate that in public, under scrutiny, while every move you make, every expression, is analyzed and interpreted. That's the reality Prince Harry faced on returning home. The stakes are not political, they are deeply personal. And that's what makes the unfolding of this story both compelling and unsettling. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking about scandal, about intrigue, about sensational headlines. But what makes this moment different is its intimacy. The revelation doesn't simply shock. It disrupts foundational assumptions about identity, about family, and about the reliability of those closest to us. And that's why, even at this early stage, the story feels urgent. Because it's not just a revelation for Harry. It's a mirror for anyone who has ever trusted, loved, or assumed they understood the people they hold dear. Now, for those watching, you might already feel the pull of curiosity. You want to know exactly what was hidden, how it was hidden, and the moment it finally came to light. And you'll get that, but not all at once. Not in the first minutes. That's the art of the slow burn expose, the deliberate pacing that allows tension to accumulate, that lets the weight of truth settle, that encourages the audience to sit in uncertainty before the revelation lands. Because the truth, when it finally arrives, has to hit with full force. And until then, we linger in questions. How long had Harry been unaware? How deep did the concealment go? What were the warning signs that were missed or ignored? And, perhaps most crucially, how will the relationships altered by this discovery endure or crumble under the new reality? And so we arrive at the end of this introduction, not with answers, but with a pause, a reflective moment that hints at what's coming. Prince Harry's return is more than a journey across physical space. It's a journey into revelation, confrontation, and the complex terrain of trust betrayed. And while we will explore the precise details, the documents, the statements, and the timeline of discovery in the chapters ahead, we first need to hold this tension, that a hidden truth existed, that it was discovered in the most painstaking way, and that Harry, until this moment, had no idea. The plane touched down quietly, almost unremarkably, at a small airstrip that seemed too ordinary for someone whose life had been anything but ordinary. Prince Harry stepped off, suitcase in hand, greeted by a small group of officials, some aides, and the cameras that inevitably followed. And yet, in that moment, there was something unmistakably absent. Not the press, not the security, not even the carefully choreographed gestures, but the feeling of home. Because returning wasn't the same as coming home. It never is, after secrets have accumulated, after time has stretched and stretched between people who once shared everything. You can imagine it, the weight of anticipation, the hope that everything will be familiar, and then the subtle, unsettling realization that everything has shifted, slightly, almost imperceptibly, but enough to make the familiar feel strange. That's what Harry faced. And it's a sensation most people will never truly understand unless they've confronted the unexpected. It's not about the geography of a place. It's about what the place has witnessed, what it has absorbed, and what you now know about it, or what it now knows about you. And there was more than just physical distance to account for. Time had changed him, shaped him. Years of reflection, of absence, of watching from afar, had layered experience over expectation. Returning home should have been a relief. But instead, it carried tension. Subtle, but profound. The kind of tension that makes a person pause mid-step, reconsider a greeting, hesitate before opening a door that should feel familiar. The corridors he walked through that day were lined with memories, of laughter, of arguments, of family dinners that had once seemed ordinary. And yet, the memories themselves had become unstable. The framework around them, the assumptions he had once held about people he trusted, had quietly shifted. Imagine remembering a story, a conversation, a shared secret, only to find later that the story wasn't true, the conversation didn't happen the way you thought, and the secret wasn't shared at all. That dissonance, that quiet, gnawing contradiction, was the environment he stepped into. And this isn't speculation. Sources close to him noted the unusual stillness in his movements, the hesitation in his interactions, the way his eyes scanned a room before committing to a conversation. It was subtle but palpable, a tension that comes from internalizing knowledge you're not sure how to reconcile. For Harry, the return wasn't about reintegration. It was about confrontation with a reality that had been curated, filtered, and, in some ways, withheld. Now, think about that for a second. How do you behave when you know something others don't? How do you navigate a space where relationships, appearances, and expectations have all been predicated on a version of reality that you now realize was carefully managed? There is a psychological weight to this, one that can't be easily shaken off. You carry it with you, even in the most mundane gestures, standing in a hallway, sitting across from someone, walking through a room filled with people who think they understand the situation. Every interaction is layered. Every word, every glance, carries more weight than it should. And yet, for Harry, this was more than just the weight of discovery. It was the burden of delayed knowledge. The realization that what had been hidden meticulously, intentionally, and perhaps mercilessly, was only now coming to light. There's a difference between being lied to and being kept in the dark by omission. The former can sometimes be confronted, argued, or dismissed. The latter is far more corrosive because it erodes the foundation of trust itself. You think you know someone, but the facts tell a different story. And no amount of reassurance can undo that. When he entered the residence, there was no grand announcement, no media spectacle, just the quiet hum of a household accustomed to protocol. And that's exactly what made the tension sharper. The juxtaposition between external normalcy and internal upheaval creates a subtle, almost invisible pressure. You feel it in small things, the way a chair is pushed back, the echo of footsteps in an empty corridor, the hesitation in a voice that was once confident. And Harry, acutely aware of what had been hidden from him, couldn't help but notice every detail. We often think about returns in simple terms, coming back, being welcomed, resuming routines. But this return was the opposite. It was a confrontation with time, with secrecy, and with the consequences of decisions made long before he knew the truth. And those decisions, orchestrated with care, had ensured that when he arrived, he wasn't just coming home physically. He was stepping into the emotional aftermath of a story that had been unfolding without him. And here's where it gets even more complicated. A return like this forces you to reassess everything, not just relationships, but the narrative itself. What did you believe? What did you trust? What was constructed to shield you? Or perhaps to manipulate your perception entirely? These are questions most people never have to ask themselves, certainly not in such a concentrated, unavoidable way. And for someone like Harry, whose life is already under public scrutiny, the stakes are multiplied. Every reflection, every internal doubt, is magnified externally. You can't escape the mirror, and the mirror is unforgiving. It's also important to note the interplay of expectation and reality. We expect homecomings to be joyful, to carry relief. We expect reconciliation, smiles, laughter, familiar routines. But what happens when the weight of hidden truth meets those expectations? You end up in a liminal space, part memory, part anticipation, part uncertainty. And it's precisely in that space that the audience begins to feel what he must have felt, the pull of the familiar undermined by the shock of discovery. This is also where narrative tension is most effective. You don't need dramatic gestures or loud confrontations. The tension exists in quiet, subtle ways. The way someone pauses before speaking, the way their eyes linger on a document, the way gestures are measured, almost rehearsed. It's in those moments that truth and perception collide. And in a story like this, where the hidden truth is both intimate and consequential, every pause, every glance, every hesitation matters. So, what did Harry confront first? Not the documents, not the statements, not even Meghan herself. He confronted the accumulation of absence, the missing pieces, the omissions, the silence. And silence can be loud. Silence can be revealing. Silence can make the familiar feel alien. And when silence is loaded with hidden facts, its weight is almost unbearable. Now, pause for a moment and consider this. The home he returned to wasn't just a physical space. It was a repository of decisions, omissions, and carefully curated narratives. Every wall, every corridor, every seemingly mundane object had witnessed years of constructed reality. And for Harry, navigating that space meant navigating an invisible minefield of information he hadn't yet fully processed.